I'm going to be talking about unlocking the value of urban trees. And Treeconomics is a social enterprise, and it's got a very general mission to highlight the value of trees. And the way we've been doing that is by working collaboratively with tree managers, public bodies, researchers, academics, businesses, anyone will have us really, to unlock that value and use that to help manage trees into the future as well. So most of that work is in the urban forest where trees meet people, and that's important because obviously the value of trees is increased where they have an effect, where more people live. So first though, I wanted to just briefly explain what is value, because there's no definitive, objective ledger of value, and actually we all create and judge value as well. It's a complete subject in itself, and I've only got 15 minutes, but I just wanted to highlight this, that value can be looked at in a variety of different ways. One of those is that intrinsic or inherent value, and as a background in forestry, of course, I've valued trees in this way for a very long time, but that doesn't cut it much when we're talking about trees in development. And this is really important, looking at trees in that intrinsic way, but actually it's very difficult to then quantify trees with that value, and it's probably best left to poets and artists to do that for us. Why even value trees, actually? I guess there's a general perception out there that trees are seen as very strong, resilient organisms. Certainly I've heard that argument. They can just sort of be chucked in the ground and left to get on with it. Well, yes and no. This is an acacia tree. It grows in the Tener Desert in Niger, in between northern Niger and the Sahara. It's the only tree for around 400 miles around, so really quite important and valuable. It actually appears on a map showing half of the North African continent. Unfortunately, it's not there anymore. Would anyone like to guess what happened to this tree? I'll take... Pardon? No, it wasn't cut down. It was hit by a driver. And so my point being is, if it can happen out here, then it's sure happening in our towns and cities where trees are damaged inadvertently. And okay, so the fact they're perceived as these strong, resilient organisms is partly to do with it, but the main reason is it's a direct result of undervaluation. And we need to value these trees, because if we don't, then economists, developers, they've got no option but to value them at nothing, because there's no value attributed to them in the ways that they work. Generally speaking, costs are known and unavoidable. That's the perception, I think, when it comes to trees. People in association with trees in the urban forest, that equals a cost. The goal always seems to be to reduce cost and increase value, where if there's no trees, there's no cost. Bingo, we've got there. So that's not where we want to be. So in this context then, how are we going to value trees? And it's mainly in the benefits they provide, or their ecosystem services. And trees are great because they provide a whole range of different benefits, all at the same time, and at very little cost. CICES, which is the Common International Classification for Ecosystem Services, lists around 95 of these benefits. Around 20 can be sort of, they relate to urban trees, but then there's only around 10 that we can quantify in this context. So things like how much stormwater are they holding up in their canopies, how much air pollution are they filtering, and then out of those 10 that can be quantified, there's around 3 or 4 that we can monetize. But work is going on, and the hope is in the future we can monetize more and more of those benefits. So what type of figures are we talking about? Well, across London, using a model called iTree Eco, which is freely available, peer-reviewed and open source. We could look at the air pollution removal by London's urban forest, and we could break that down month by month, pollutant by pollutant. Again, this was a big collaborative project with the Forestry Commission, Mayor of London, Trees for Cities, Forest Research, a whole host of different organisations collaborating together. And that's a service based on the UK social damage costs. So if that pollution wasn't raked out by the trees, it would end up damaging us and buildings. And that's a service worth £126 million every single year, which is a fairly substantial figure. It still only represents less than 8% of the emissions from vehicles in London, though. So figures like this allows us and tree managers and people involved with trees to talk to asset managers and developers and economists in a language that's understood by them, pounds, shillings and pence. I'll talk about cost benefit in a moment. There's a Trees Design Action stand over there, and they've got this excellent publication, A Guide for Decision Makers, and in there they've listed 12 principles for urban trees. Number 10 is take an asset management approach. If you want to safeguard your trees, get funding and improve the trees for the future, then this is essential. In fact, all 12 are pretty essential. So it explains in there that the ISO defines asset management as the coordinated activities of an organisation to realise life cycle value from assets in delivery of its objectives. So it's rooted in an understanding of the life cycle or time it takes to grow those trees and the value, and is guided by those objectives, which can be shared. So we're just going to look now at some of the examples where this has been put into practice. And we did some work, again with Forest Research, Davey, Evans, and the Highways Agency, now Highways England, and we measured the trees on their softer state. We measured the structure of the trees and then looked at the benefits they provided, the air pollution removal, the carbon storage and sequestration, and the amount of water that they attenuated during a rainfall event. We then looked at those benefits across the entire estate. So the value of those benefits provided by a typical woodland compartment along the Area 1 of the highways in the southwest of England was around 15 pence per metre squared. But it's not just about woodland, they've got a lot of grass and scrubland. So when it's averaged across everything, that comes out at 8 pence per metre squared. So that's the benefits that are being provided. But if you look at the costs, and we know those from their maintenance team, the cost of managing the entire soft estate is only 0.07 pence per square metre. So those figures help to justify and maintain existing budgets. And the conclusion from this is the benefits of that natural capital in Area 1 outweigh the cost by a factor of approximately 100. And this is a conservative measure of the benefit. You know, there's only 3 benefits being measured, but all the costs are pretty much known. Slightly separate, this is just cost versus cost. So we're not even thinking about benefits here, but we're looking at planting and maintenance of trees, which is the dark green colour, versus installing a fence for screening purposes. And we just looked at the whole life cycle of the trees and the fence. And by year, although the costs are similar at the beginning, by year 50, the fence is more expensive, but actually by year 100, that fence is over twice the cost of planting and maintaining trees. Torbay was one of the first projects that we did with the council there, and then we worked with an economist, because I'm not an economist, and to look at cost-benefit ratios for some of the trees in Torbay. And this is looking at the whole urban forest, and we can see here we've got the costs, and we know all those, but only 2 of the benefits of this point that we could measure were carbon sequestration and air pollution. So this doesn't even look at the avoided runoff. And you can see, again, those benefits far outweigh the costs. And you might say, this is great, but so what? But it was this kind of factual information that helped the tree officer there safeguard his budget, and then he secured a £25,000 increase in his tree planting budget using this kind of data. So these are the costs that we factored into that study: the planting, the establishment, leaf clearance, pavement damage, maintenance, the salaries of the tree officer and the other staff, risk assessing the trees, removal of dead dying trees, maintenance, emissions, and ecosystem disservices as well. So trees provide us with benefits, but actually in certain circumstances they can actually provide us with disbenefit as well. So whilst trees might take air pollution out of the system, they can also create biogenic volatile organic compounds. Birch pollen, as an example, in London plains, they can actually aggravate a bit of hay fever and things like that. But actually the model we've been using does take that into account, and the overall effect is positive. So it's also about having the right tree in the right place, which is something the Trees and Design Action Group have been advocating. So in Torbay, we looked at this rather sorry example of a cherry tree and an oak growing in a park. Obviously, the oak requires less maintenance, but it's a bigger tree as well. And so we did these cost-benefit ratios for those two trees, and we know they're two extremes of the spectrum, but for every pound spent on the cherry tree, it's returning 1 pence in benefits. So that's not really a good use of money. The oak actually was returning £4.79 in benefits for every pound spent on it. So it represents a very good investment. Up until this time, we hadn't been discounting, but working with the economists from Natural England, we discounted those at 3.5%. And the reason for that is because it's the UK Treasury Green Book recommended discount rate. And when you discount it by that, the cost-benefit ratio isn't quite so great. It's practical to use this, and the reason why it's recommended is because then you can compare different projects using the same discount rate. But we also used a 2.1% discount rate, and the reason for that, I've got written down because I'm not an economist, was it's an argument about intergenerational equity. And I think that is based around the fact that trees grow and appreciate, and they last a long time. When you think about trees growing 100, 200 years, but a lot of design cycles and whole life cycles in these developments, we're kind of looking at 30 or 60 years for design life and whole life, whereas trees far exceed that. So those studies are quite old now. This was done in 2012, but since then there have been nearly 20 studies using the iTree Eco model carried out by business improvement districts, community groups have been able to pick this tool up and use it to demonstrate the value of trees in their local area. Forest Research have done 2 studies in Scotland and most of the Welsh cities now. Obviously London at the top, but even this is only takes us up to 2015. So to bring us bang up to date, I thought I'd share something with you that was actually only launched on Monday. And this is work, again, another collaborative project. With less, you can achieve more by working with a good group of people and their different expertises. But this here demonstrates the value of trees in the London Borough of Ealing, and that's now available on a microsite. And you can actually go on here and click on the different wards within Ealing and see the different values for carbon storage, air pollution removal, what it would cost to replace those trees if they were all lost. So that's a really good tool for visualising the benefits of the trees, what they're worth, and comparing and contrasting as well within that borough. Not quite tree value, but I think it's important to mention. Again, we're on the micro site from Ealing. You can zoom in and look at individual trees and see how healthy those trees are. What is the condition of those trees? Because if you've got unhealthy trees, then they're not going to be delivering benefits into the future. The other thing we can look at with this is what might the potential impact of pests and diseases be? If these trees were subject to things like ash dieback or plain wilt that is in France at the moment and may come over here, then there'll be an impact on the benefits delivery of the trees. And what would it cost to replace them should they be lost? So that's freely available online and can be interrogated and looked at. So that's pretty much it from me. If there's only 2 take-home messages from this session, or from my session, trees and forests provide a significant value to society, and I hope we all pretty much understood and knew that anyway, but it's about understanding and communicating that value. That's the essential part to improve the management of those trees and community well-being. Thank you very much. TDAG, yeah, here.